Hello and welcome to session number 18 of FileMaker Group Therapy for Citizen Developers. My name is Tim Jones. In today's session, we're going to examine the script step called Perform Script on Server. There are stories told in the FileMaker community of scripts that used to take 10 minutes to run, now completing in 5 seconds once the developer employed Perform Script on Server. So we're going to find out what is Perform Script on Server. We'll discuss why and when to use it, discover what it does, learn how to use it successfully, and especially how to avoid some dangerous pitfalls. So what is Perform Script on Server, or PSOS, as I'll call it from here on out? It's a script step that we can use in our script to speed up certain tasks. Like the standard Perform Script step, it allows one script to trigger another script to run. However, the called script is run entirely on the FileMaker server that's hosting the database. And there is your first caveat. The database must be hosted by FileMaker server before you can use PSOS, either on premises or in the cloud. So, why and when should we use PSOS? Well, some scripted operations run faster on server, particularly steps like adding or editing many records, importing many records, performing complex execute SQL functions that return large data sets, and others. It's the moving of data back and forth between the server where it lives and the end user or client that adds time to many operations. For example, when you manually go to a record to view or edit it, the entire record with all its field values is fetched from the server where it lives and copied to your computer or device. If you edit the value in even one field of that record, then the entire record must be uploaded back to server to update the table so the other users see your changes. If you automate the creation or modification of hundreds or even thousands of records, that will generate a lot of network traffic between the client and the server. Likewise, if you need to calculate a result that summarizes many records, say for a report or a dashboard layout, that too may pass a lot of data between server and client. In general, you should consider using PSOS if it will reduce the amount of network traffic between the client and the server when performing the automated tasks. If all the work can be done on the server with no need for interaction from the end user, the work may complete much more quickly. Now, what does PSOS do? First, it initiates a new user session on server logged in as another you. It's as though you got up from your desk while still logged into the database there. You walked into the server room and opened the database again directly on the FileMaker server computer. The called script has the same privileges that you do, so whatever you can do, it can do, and whatever you can't do, it cannot do. But the called script has no idea where you are in the database back at your desk, including what layout you're on, what records were in the found set, their sort order, which record was current, and so on. Remember, it's a new session. Also, you may recall from our session number 7 back in January that global fields and global variables are session specific. So if they even exist in this new server-side session, they probably don't have the same values as in your desktop session. It's also important to note that the on first window open script trigger, if it is enabled, will fire and do all the things you programmed it to do. Therefore, to use PSOS successfully, you should start by building an exit in your on first window open script if it's called by a server-side script. If you don't, every time one of your users runs a script that includes a PSOS, your on open script will run, probably without any benefit to the called script. This unnecessary work could slow down or even crash your server if you have enough users calling enough PSOS scripts. Next, you should provide the server-side script with all the context it is going to need to do the job, including layout, found set of records, sort order, current record, and anything else relevant to the tasks you're trying to perform in that script. Remember, PSOS starts a whole new user session from scratch. Lastly, PSOS is not an automatic speed boost, so do not use it for every script. Only use it for those jobs where it will decrease the amount of data passed between the server and the client, or where the processing speed of the server outstrips the client and can return a calculated result faster. Let's go into my demo file for this session so I can show you how to use the PSOS script step, how to exit out of the onFirst window open script if it's run in a server-side session, and how to establish context. So here's this sample PSOS database that I have built for this particular session. And I'm going to get into our script workspace. I've already created a couple of scripts, but they're virtually, well, they're not complete. Here's the script that we're going to call and have run on server. This is the one that we're going to call with our perform script on server step. And its job is to just create X number of new records in a particular table. So you can see that I've started by declaring a variable called quantity, and I'm just hard coding for now the value of 5, meaning we want it to create 5 records. Then I'm creating a variable called counter that'll be used to count the number of times we go through the loop down below. And I've started that variable out at a value of 1. Then inside this loop, we create a new record. We increment our counter variable to be equal to itself plus 1. And then we have an exit condition to check to see if the counter value is now greater than the quantity of records that we asked to be created. So that as that counter gets incremented, loop after loop, iteration after iteration through the loop, eventually this statement will become true. The counter will have grown to be larger than the quantity, and it will exit out of our loop. Next, we've got the script that we're going to use to call that script. And here, I'm going to use our perform script on server. I just typed PSOS script step. Hit return. We can specify the script to be called here, and it's going to be this one here. I'm going to hold off on supplying a script parameter for a little while. We'll get into that later in today's session. And for the wait for completion, I'm going to set that to off for right now, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later as well. And I'll save this script. Now, we know that this PSOS command will initiate a new session on the server, which will cause our onOpen script to run. Let's take a look at it now. Here's our onOpen script that will be triggered automatically every time a new session is begun. Now, this script will run our initialize globals script, then it will run our detect device script, and then it will navigate to the Z utility layout. We don't need any of that to happen in the case of a PSOS initiated session. So let's add a condition up top here that exits out of this script if it's called or run under a server environment. Let's put an if statement here. If, and then the formula that we're going to write, I'll go ahead and write it first and then talk about it in a moment. We'll use pattern count and we'll use get application version as a couple of functions in here to do the job. And for the search string that we're searching for, I'll use the word server. There. And inside the if and if block, I'll just say, hey, if that's true, then I want to exit out of this script and not pass back any result. There we go. Now let's talk about that conditional, okay? First of all, the get application version function right here. It returns a text string that describes the application that's being used to create the current database session. And I'll switch over to FileMaker's help page on this function, the get application version function, and we'll see the different text strings that it will possibly return. It'll pass back the word pro and then the version number of FileMaker Pro for anybody who's connecting to the database using FileMaker Pro. In other words, if this session was initiated in FileMaker Pro client software. It'll pass back the phrase web publishing engine and then the version of it for people who connect to our database over the web, which includes WebDirect as well as custom web publishing. We'll get back XDBC and then the version for any ODBC or JDBC clients. We'll get back the word server and then the version of the server for anybody who connects or any session that's initiated via FileMaker Server or the FileMaker Cloud product. Obviously, that's the one that we're checking for. Notice the phrase or the word I put in here as the search text for our pattern count function said, hey, look for the word server inside the results of this get application version function. And we see the other possible results of our get application version function here include Go iPad, and FileMaker Data API Engine. All right. Next, the pattern count function, it returns how many times it finds a search phrase. Again, our search phrase was the word server within a larger phrase, and the larger phrase in this case being whatever result is returned by get application version. It doesn't ask you, or the pattern count's not asking where you found it, but rather, did you find it? How many times did you find it? Pattern count, right? Count how many times this pattern of characters appears within this string of characters. Now, if it comes back with a 0, meaning I didn't find the word server inside the results of the get application version function, then obviously the session that's running this on OpenScript wouldn't have been initiated by a server. And if it is a 0 result, well, 0 is the Boolean equivalent of false. So our if condition here would be false, and the step included in between the if and the end if would be skipped. If, on the other hand, the pattern count function results in not 0, 1, for example, well, any number other than 0 is considered the Boolean equivalent of true. So our if condition would be considered true, and the statement between our if and end if would be performed. That's going to prevent a lot of unnecessary processing on the server. Now, even though our onOpenScript will not perform this go to layout Z utility layout when run on server because of the conditional we just added, there's still no guarantee that the new session will land in the data table where we want to create our new records. We need to build that setting of that context into the script that PSOS calls. So let's go over into our script here and let's add a little bit of context. We need to get this session into the right layout. I'll just insert a go to layout script step, GTL, hit return, choose layout, and we want to go to the data layout that's based on the data table, which is the table in which we'd like to create those X number of new records. There. Now I'll save the script, and I'll save my onOpenScript as well. In this case, since we're just trying to create new records, getting to a layout that's based on the right table is really all the context we need to establish. We don't need to worry about found set of records, which record was current, what sort order was in effect, and so forth. All right, so far so good. Let me jump back into our slides. Sorry. There. And even though we've taken care of some of those issues, there are still some dangerous pitfalls when using Perform Script on Server that we want to avoid. First, not all script steps are compatible when run under server. Next, PSOS scripts cannot be debugged using the data viewer and script debugger. They run as though in a black box, and we can only see the call and response. Also, uncommitted records are skipped, meaning if another user is editing a record while your PSOS script tries to edit it, record locking will prevent your script from making the edit. The script will just skip ahead to its next step. Lastly, you cannot nest PSOS calls. A script being run on server cannot contain another PSOS step. It would be redundant and unnecessary. Just use the standard perform script step instead. Since the PSOS script is running in a server-side session, any scripts that it triggers will also run in that same server-side session. Now, let's take a look at how to avoid some of these pitfalls. I'll show you how you can tell which script steps will fail under server and how to debug a PSOS script. Well, sort of. First, the script workspace can teach us which script steps are incompatible under any connection method. Here in the script workspace, you can use this show compatible method menu, or show compatibility menu, to say, hey, I want to see which script steps are compatible under any context or which are compatible under Macintosh, Windows, server, that's the one we're interested in. And we can see that if I switch the steps list here to an alphabetical list, that a number of them have turned gray, meaning, these gray steps are not compatible in a server-side session. They will not work if the session that the script is trying to be run in is run under server. Let me just scroll through and show you at a glance the script steps that are incompatible. Many of them have to do with user interaction, because obviously it's a server-side script. There's no user sitting at a keyboard and mouse waiting to interact. And files and pauses, all of those things are disallowed in a script that's running in a server-side session. Also, if we had script steps in any of our scripts, those too would be grayed out now that I've chosen server, for example, from the compatibility menu. Now we don't have any, but just for fun, let's say I were to add another script step here, like close popover. There, see how the close popover script step is gray? Because it's not compatible in a server-side session. There, normally, but in server-side, that's not compatible. So it'll just be skipped, it'll be ignored. Nonetheless, I don't need that in there. Next, the script debugger does not step us into a PSOS script like it does other called scripts. As a workaround, though, you can try temporarily using a standard perform script call, disabling the PSOS call, and then running the script with the debugger open. For example, here in our script that calls the script that's going to create the records, we're calling it using a PSOS command. Instead, let's add a standard perform script command, ps, return. We'll have it perform the same script, again with no script parameter. And then I'll just come in and disable this script step. You can disable the script step here under the edit menu, assuming that you've got the advanced tools feature available. And there, it means that script step will not be performed. I'll go ahead and save that script. And now we can run through the script with the debugger open. Switch back over here, get the script debugger and data viewer open. And I'll run over into the data layout. I've got a button here that's programmed to trigger our start script right there. The script debugger intercepts the running of that script. We can step into it. And notice how it skipped over the disabled script step, goes right to the only active script step in this script, which is a perform script, and I'll step into that one, and it lets us go in. Whereas the PSOS script step, the one that was disabled on the previous script, would not have taken us into its steps to let us, or into these steps to let us see how they're going to work. And I'll go ahead and walk through these steps. First, we're going to set a variable called quantity, and we can see in the data viewer that variable got set successfully. Then we'll set a variable called counter. Likewise, it gets set successfully. It'll go to the data layout, which I was already on, so no problem there. And then we'll loop through the creation of new records. We'll increment the counter to 2, and we'll check the exit condition. The exit condition wasn't true, so it cycles back around to the top of the loop, creates a new record, increments the counter to 3, checks the exit condition, still false, loops back around, new record, increment the counter, check the exit condition. Again, new record, increment the counter, now it's 5. 5 is not greater than 5, so our statement is still false, which is good because there have only been 4 records created. And we'll continue on, makes the 5th record, increments the counter. Now the counter is worth 6, and our exit condition is going to be true, so it will exit out of the loop because 6 is greater than 5. Bing, and we're out of the loop and done with the script. All right, so it looks like our called script, this one here, is going to work successfully. Now we will, eventually we'll switch it back to, let's do it now. We'll switch it back to where the PSOS step is enabled and the perform script step is disabled. The keyboard shortcut I just used to do that, you probably noticed it earlier. On the Mac, it's command / /. All right, let's save that script. And I'll jump back into our PowerPoint slides. Since a PSOS script is like a black box, it has inputs and outputs. Let's examine the ins and outs of PSOS. You'll want to pass any values that the script will need to do its work into it as a script parameter. And the server-side script can pass back a single result containing up to 1,000,000 characters. In our session number 11 back in March, we looked at passing data in and out of scripts, but let me encourage you to begin to learn, if you've not already, the value list functions like list, get value, left values, middle values, and right values, as well as the JSON functions like JSON set element and JSON get element. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation, and it's a handy little text language for packaging and passing multiple data values. I'm sure we'll take a peek into JSON in a future group therapy session. Let me quickly show you how to get data into and out of a server-side script. We want the user to be able to specify how many data records should be created in our automated script. So we'll pass the value from this global field here into the script. Back over in our start script, the initial one, we're going to apply a script parameter of a reference to that global field that's in my Z-utility table. There it is, that's the field. And likewise, we'll set a parameter on this perform script step. I know it's disabled, but still, we'll make it work so that next time we enable it, it will pass in that same field value into its script. Okay. Then likewise, in the called script, right, the called script is the one create records in data quantity, that's this one here. We'll modify our quantity variable to not be hard-coded to a value of 5, but rather we'll use a formula here that will go and grab the script parameter. And it needs a little bit of special treatment. You'll notice here that the calculation result must be text, or in other words, or let me say it this way, the incoming script parameters are always passed as text. And there's a little bit of a quirk that would happen if we don't use this getAsNumber function. The getAsNumber function will grab whatever text you feed it, whatever text you send into it, and extract out the numeric meaning or the numeric value of it. Okay? So if some data is being passed in as text and you need it to be understood as a numeric value, getAsNumber is your tool. And then we'll simply use the get script parameter function to say, okay, grab the script parameter that was passed in by the calling script. There we go. All right. Also, let's say that we wanted to pass back a script result from this script once it's completed creating all those records. So at the very end of the script, I'll add an exit script step. Exit script is the step that we use to be able to pass back some value to the calling script. And let's say that we just want to pass back a little text message that says, quote, created space, and then the number of records created, which is going to be stored in that quantity variable, $quantity, ampersand, new data records, period, end quote. There. So it'll just say created 5 new data records or created 1,000 new data records and so forth. Now, once we've got that result being passed back, we're going to want to do something with it. So we'll go back to our initiating or calling script, and we'll say, all right, let's grab that data that's being passed back and store it in a variable. Technically, we wouldn't have to, but it's very good practice to do so in case you want to use it multiple times or in multiple situations. And the function that we use here is simply the get script result function. Again, we looked at those ins and outs, get script parameter, get script result, back in our session 11. All right, let's go ahead and say okay there, and okay there. And then what we'll do is we'll simply show a custom dialog box with SCD, show custom dialog, and we'll say there, and we'll just, in the message box, we'll just put a reference to our result variable that I just created on the previous line. All right, so create the result that grabs its value from the script result being passed back from the called script, from the most recently called script, I should mention, and then display that message in a little alert dialog box. Now's where we need to talk about this wait for completion option. In the perform script on server step, this wait for completion option can be either off or on. Now, what it means, if it's off, it means that that this script will not wait until this called script has finished all of its work. It will simply blaze right on and continue performing its statements. So the two scripts would be performing simultaneously, but of course, this script is being performed in a server-side session, while the start script is being performed here locally. Okay, but we don't want any jumping the gun. We want our custom dialog box, our alert message saying, "Hey, I created 1,000 new records for you," to wait until the job is actually done. So let's say wait for completion. In other words, pause here at this point in this script until the work being done by this script has completed. Then proceed on and set the variable and show the custom dialog. That's very important, that wait for completion. Sometimes you want it on if you need the results of the work being done on the server to have a chance to finish before proceeding on with this script. Sometimes, on the other hand, you're just saying, "Hey, I just want to fire off such and such a script that's going to do all this great work on the server. I don't need to wait for it to finish. I'm on my way out the office door anyway, so just run it on the server," for example. Okay, but you need to give that good, careful consideration. If anything in this script is dependent upon that work being done and being completed, then definitely turn wait for completion on. All right, I'll save all my changes to all those scripts. And then let's say, well, we'll do this just a short one. We'll say, how many records? 10. We want to create 10 records. All right, go. And it creates those 10 records and shows us the result. Fantastic. Didn't take long. Now let's say we want to be a little more aggressive. Right? Let's say I want to do 1,000 records. There. And we'll click go, and I'm going to get my stopwatch going here, and we're going to time this to see how long it might take to create 1,000 records. Here we go. Boom. Done. 2.31 seconds. Okay, to create 1,000 records when done on server. Now let's flip it around. In our start script, let's disable this line and re-enable this line so that the script will be performed locally instead of on server. It'll be performed not using PSOS, but just performed locally. And we'll do that same thing. We'll create another 1,000 records. Okay? And I'll get my stopwatch reset. It was 2.3 seconds for the last one. Ready, go. .72 seconds, a pretty dramatic difference, 25%. And this only multiplies the more work you're having your server-side script do. Okay, so even that simple example gives a pretty dramatic instance of PSOS working in our favor. All right, so now you know how to successfully use perform script on server to speed up some scripted operations. Are there any questions about what we looked at today?